Singapore's governing People's Action Party won a decisive victory in the general election just a few weeks ago, gaining even more seats than it had in the 2011 election. Yet the campaign also revealed the prominence of opposition parties who tapped into the public's concerns over growing inequality, what macroeconomic reforms are needed for the wealthy city-state to satisfy both domestic demands as well as maintain its regional supremacy. Well, all of that information and more comes from Singapore and wider Asia economics expert Song Sang-woon. So first, let's talk about the role of Singapore's youth. We know that they have become an increasingly vocal critic of government policy. Are they going to be the ones that really force the government's hand in creating structural reforms?
Well, I suppose the rise of social media, where I suppose the younger generation tapped into, certainly gives them the avenue to, I think, express themselves far more easily these days than what their parents or grandparents were able to do itself, which is why the government is trying to be a little bit more, shall we say, inclusive in trying to accommodate and listen to the wider view beyond what the traditional support group has been.
How do you start those conversations around structural reform without discouraging Singapore's role as an investment hub?
Well, I suppose the key thing really is it's all about making sure Singapore stays relevant, but it's strategically located itself, riding on what it has been doing well from years ago in terms of ensuring that it is a logistic hub for businesses itself. So it's expanding beyond that theme to get other businesses to come here by making sure that it stays relevant by having the infrastructure, by having the legal framework, by having transparency in the rule of the law itself, and making sure that the rule of the law prevails over everything else, such that business interests can be protected.
Can you be more specific about the type of FDI opportunities that exist in the ASEAN region?
Well, obviously in Singapore, it's very straightforward. It's not the cheapest place for you to manufacture anything from. So any manufacturer who wants to come here has to be basically do the sums right, in that it has to be very capital intensive and highly value added in terms of manufacturing. Services is a bit more interesting itself. Obviously at this juncture, Singapore, tiny place, 120 square kilometers, population small, 5.5 million people, but nonetheless there is plenty of growth opportunity in the services side, be it in the financial service sector, be it in transport, logistics, legal, etc. As well. So in return, what we see businesses doing is they use Singapore as a headquarters from which they can expand into the region. For instance, there's always that strong sense that Singapore accounting standard and transparency in law and order itself in terms of corporate governance is strong enough for business to be able to set foot over here, oversee operation around the region, even further north into North Asia as well.
It's great to talk about the foreign investment opportunities, but then for the average Singaporean, are they really going to be feeling the impact of this growth and prosperity? Because that really seems to be one of the major issues and sticking points in the election campaign.
Yeah, I think certainly, I suppose the key things really is as long as there's growth, there is opportunity for everyone. Now, the interesting bit now is the last, say, 50 years itself, it has been promoting the interests of the business first at almost all costs, which is why in terms of accommodating business wishes to keep costs down, it's really about, say, importing foreign labor, such that at the lower end, foreign worker at the lower end, paid as little as possible, as much as what the business can get away with, by importing more foreign workers itself. But I think at this point now, that strategy isn't going to work. As we've seen from the 2011 election itself, there has been basically pushback in that, hey, Singapore is small. Are we therefore allowing labor growth, population growth to expand at a far faster pace than what Singaporeans are used to? If you look back, it had been growing at a pace of 1 million people in Singapore every decade itself, and that has been the case for the past 3 decades itself. And somewhere along the line, I think there was a bit of a disconnect among the various ministries itself, in that while population growth was allowed to accelerate because of the needs of the businesses themselves, the infrastructure itself hasn't kept pace with that loosening of population policies. So there was that crunch, which is now only being tackled at this juncture. So going forward, how this will pan out with a Singaporean will really be, okay, government is committed to slowing down population growth and accelerating infrastructure, but is it at a pace that will be satisfactory to a Singaporean when they go to the poll next?